When I first planned on making a video review of Kodak Vericolor III, I figured it would involve a nice hike up in Lassen National Park, burning some calories, going for a swim, taking some landscapes, but due to some rather serious circumstances, this review transformed into something different altogether. I was honestly thinking of just scrapping the video altogether, but in the end, I think it's better off if I show you kind of the process of what starts off as a roll of landscape film and transforms into something more meaningful. Before diving headfirst into my day of shooting this roll of Vericolor III though, let's go and actually talk about the film stock itself. Kodak Vericolor III is the third of the Vericolor line, as you might imagine. The first two were introduced sometime in the 1970s, and then this third one was introduced in 1983 as the most updated version. It is 160 ISO, general purpose professional level film. That means it could be shot for portraiture, landscapes, natural light, artificial light. It's supposed to be color accurate, fine grained, sharp, and it's supposed to be a little more storage stable than the first two Vericolor films. This film stock was actually produced well into the 2000s until 2002 when it was replaced by the Kodak Portra line. So in many ways, Vericolor III here is like Papa Portra. It is the grandfather Portra, and I think you'll see going forward just why it has that reputation. The roll of Vericolor III that I shot came from a pro pack of film that expired in 2000. I've already shot a test roll of this back in 2020, and the results came out fairly well in the end, but I was hoping I could do better with this roll. The original plan that I had for this test roll of Vericolor III was to go up to Lassen National Park to what is called the Ridge Lakes, which are these beautiful lakes way up in the mountains. It's a really short hike, honestly, so it makes for a nice evening hike. And that was pretty much the gist of it. Just a nice simple hike, take some nice landscapes. It was warm and really windy that day, which, as you might imagine, are not the ideal conditions for a wildfire to spark in the area. Because this Vericolor III is 220 film, I brought along my Pentax 6.7, which accepts 220 film, as well as various lenses. Because this 160 ISO film is almost 30 years old, I exposed it 2 stops over box speed at about ISO 40. Right out of the gate, this film spared no expense at blowing me away. Kodak Vericolor III handled the highlight and shadow detail with such ease that I can see why it'd be the grandfather Portra, essentially. Color shifts are actually pretty minimal as well, despite this being expired, and if anything, there might be just a slightly cooler tone. This is another photo that I really like. The color reproduction accuracy of this film has held up fairly well over the years, and I really enjoy this level of contrast for landscape photography. It didn't take long for us to reach the Ridge Lakes. It's such an awesome spot. It's one of my favorites in the whole park. It's fairly short hike, honestly, but for what you get in return, you're fairly isolated on your own, and the view is amazing. With that being said, though, because this ridge is right along the lake, you're going to lose a lot of that nice evening light in the end. This time of year, the lake water is seriously the perfect temperature too. It is like the perfect level of refreshing while not feeling like bath water. Here's another photo that I really like. The highlight and shadow retention is exactly what I was hoping for, and these aren't easy scenes for most film stocks to capture, yet this old Vericolor III is really excelling. We'd only been up at the Ridge Lakes for about 10 minutes when my phone really started to go off like crazy. Lassen's one of those weird places where you have no service at the lower levels, lower elevations, but once you get up top to the top of your hikes, you usually get perfect bars. So anyhow, an arsonist had started a small fire near my house in Chico, which is about 50 minutes away from Lassen National Park. And because it was so hot and windy that day, it really took off pretty much immediately. The fire had started right around when we left for Lassen that day, and by the time we got to the Ridge Lakes, it was threatening most of the town of Chico, including my parents' house. It didn't take long for us to realize that we had to get our asses home ASAP. So just as soon as we reached the lakes, we had to turn around and go back down. When we were hiking up to the lakes about an hour before, it was pretty much a typical day, blue skies. On the way back down though, already less than an hour later, the whole park was completely smoked out. And that's crazy considering the fire was 50 miles away. We knew that this fire was serious, but nothing really prepared us for what we saw as we entered Chico. The fire was growing at about 1,000 acres an hour, and nearly the entire ridge outside of town was engulfed in a wall of flame. My parents' home was under an evacuation warning, and there was this crazy open view of the fire from the neighborhood, so honestly I just said fuck it, I'm just going to photograph it and hope it doesn't make a run in our direction. My family already lost everything once before in the 2018 campfire, so we were feeling kind of numb and ambivalent at this point. And I just should stress that we were well out of harm's way while I was taking these photos. I was taking photos still with that Vericolor III, which honestly is not ideal given the conditions. It was pretty dark at night and it was an expired film and it was super windy. Just not a great scenario for decent photos. By 1 a.m. I could tell the fire had stopped growing in our direction and I felt like it was a good time to go to sleep. The park fire had gone within 3 miles of my parents' home, which is close but not insanely close. That night, the park fire ravaged the community of Cohasset, forcing many of its residents to flee for their lives on dirt logging roads and even via helicopter airlift. Most of the community lost their homes, but fortunately no one was killed in this firestorm. All things considered, that's one thing you have to be thankful for. The next morning, I was up before dawn and ready to take some more photographs. The winds had died down around Chico, but the fire was still going quite strong, and to capture the scene, I did use up those last few photos of Vericolor III. Of course, I didn't stop photographing after that roll of Vericolor. Throughout the course of the fire, I made a personal mission to photograph what I could and when I could. Since 2018, I've been photographing wildfires and their aftermath in a safe manner, of course. And that's just a personal project of mine that I really take close to heart. The 2024 park fire started on July 24th and grew over to 300,000 acres within 3 days. By the time it ran out of steam about 2 weeks later, the fire had maxed out at 429,000 acres. Hell, the fire almost burned into Lassen National Park, which is crazy considering that the fire started 50 miles away. Wildfire has been an essential part of life here in the North State. The 2024 park fire ended up being the most recent chapter in a history of fires that has really just devastated this area since 2018. These fires combined have destroyed over 22,000 homes and structures, including my very own, in 2018, and it's also burnt, just in general, 2 million acres of lands, which to put in perspective would be about 3 Luxembourgs or a couple smaller states worth. Anyways, I wasn't really sure what direction to go in with this video, to have it be a film review or to cover just this disaster unfolding before us. Both of these things did happen over the course of one roll of 220 film. I hope you guys maybe got something out of this video, whether it be just the omnipresent threat of Wildfire here in the North State, or perhaps that Vericolor III under the best of conditions is something like Portra in its capabilities. Nonetheless, I hope you at least got something from this video, and if anything, I hope I don't have to make another video like this in the future.